Hey team, excited to be talking today about a first time guest experience. I have no doubt the conversation is going to be fun and maybe even a little bit helpful. But for those that are watching, if you don't know, we'll be referencing a resource called the First Time Guest Checklist. But Greg, as the author of this resource, I want to hear from you first. Give us the drive, the motivation behind developing a first time guest checklist.
Yeah, it goes back for me to when I was at Elevation, and part of my job was to travel to all the different campuses and make sure things were going well and give feedback and just evaluate and make sure that the experience we were creating was the experience that we want to create for people. Um, so I kind of learned over time that as I walked into a campus on Sunday, there was a mental checklist I was going through of things that I was looking for, things that I wanted to make sure were in place, things that I didn't want to see that I wanted to make sure we were not doing, and everything in between. So the resource kind of came out of, I think we all to some degree have a mental checklist we're going through when we walk into a church. And what would it look like to kind of download those thoughts into something that could be helpful and transmissible to other churches and other teams? My mind tends to work in checklists. So I like to create categories and buckets and try to order things in my mind. That it just helps me rather than having a mess or a chaos of different thoughts or feelings. Can I order this? Can I have kind of like a framework or a system for how I evaluate something that's in front of me? So that's where it came from. And if you access the resource, you'll see that it kind of takes you on the journey of a first time guest. And the goal really is that it helps you kind of see your church's experience from the perspective of a first time guest. What are they seeing and experiencing in the parking lot? What are they feeling, when they connect with your volunteers? What are they hearing when they come sit in the service, and the language that's used and the information that's communicated? And how well do all these things line up with the kind of experience that we want to create for our guests?
Yeah, that's good. It's so interesting how quickly we can do something so regularly. It becomes, I say a lot of times that whatever becomes common, we become complacent to. And so it's like, it's just so hard. There's even surfaces maybe right in front of me right now that are growing clutter, but it's just like, that's where the stuff goes. I don't think about it until we have guests. And then when I have guests, it's like, oh, crud, we got to clean this up. So I know it's a super useful resource. So thanks for putting that thought process in that order to help us and to help the church. You come out of the gate strong, I think, with the why being so intentional, with a first time guest experience being so important. I mean, you even say in there the stakes are high. Unpack that a little bit for us of who we're thinking through or who might be coming through the doors and why those stakes are high.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, I think when someone chooses to attend your church for the first time, they are making a decision the whole time of whether or not this is something they enjoy, whether or not they feel like this is something that will add value to their life, and whether or not they're going to come back. And for me, we have this checklist of all the practical things we're going to look at and evaluate. But before I even think about that, I kind of want to get into the heart of what we're doing and really empathize with the people who are coming to our church. You said it. I mean, we're so used to this. We are church people. We love the church, and we're used to being in church. We know what to expect. We kind of know how things go. We know what's expected of us. We know what's normal and what's not. We have the curse of knowledge in a very significant way, and I think it requires a lot of discipline to try to put ourselves back in the shoes of the first time guest and to imagine what's going through their mind today. What kind of questions are they coming in with? Right. What kind of hesitations might they be coming in with? What might their previous experience with church be? Maybe it wasn't very good. Maybe they're coming in with their defenses up. And even outside of all that, I just think about myself. Anytime I walk into an environment that I've never been in, that's full of people that I don't know, that's a very intimidating place to be. And when we can kind of feel that inside of ourselves and remember what that's like and imagine what they're going through, that should really help us to inform all the little detailed decisions that we make about the experience that we're trying to create. And I think in most cases, we really only get one shot to give people our best. We really only give people one shot. And if they don't have a good experience, they're not coming back.
Yeah, that's great. All right, team. The first category that we talk about is defining the win. When thinking through the lens of a first time guest, what would you define as a win for a great guest experience, just from your perspective?
I think Greg was spot on. There's nothing more valuable that somebody could trust you with than the spiritual development of themselves, their spouse, their children. And they're walking in the door because whatever is in place right now might not be a fit. They're feeling some sort of call, some sort of pull to consider a new place for that to happen. It might be that they've never had it and they feel completely like they need a place that can teach them from square one. What does it mean to love God? What does it mean to be in relationship? It could be somebody who's had a difficult experience and they're looking for something new, or maybe somebody that's coming back that hasn't been around in a long time. And so what we're potentially being entrusted with is so important, and it's such an honor that they would consider us to take them on that journey of growing in their relationship with the Lord, of discipling their family. And so it's really exciting to think about that, but it's such a, to me, it gives me so much more purpose in those moments where I can get very task oriented with, did we have somebody in each place doing the checklist, doing the tasks, but continuing to be really attached to that God's working in that person's heart. They're listening and looking for something that says, you are important to God. We love you. We're here for you. We want to, be a family for you. And all of that to me is, to Greg's point, is so much more helpful in giving us the fuel for all the other things we're trying to accomplish while they're there.
Right. That's good. Phil, do you have a win if you're putting yourself in a first-time guest experience shoes, or first-time guest shoes, and you're having this experience? What would you say is like, this is the win? Knowing that we have a variety or diversity of backgrounds, what would you say from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for me, I would just build on everything that the three of you have said. I think it's coupling the perspective of the first time guest. I think about coupling that with what's really fundamentally needed is a sense of urgency. I think sometimes the weekend happens every weekend, and I don't think anybody intends to be less enthusiastic or excited or committed to it. But I think sometimes we have to bring ourselves back to, thinking about somebody that we know that we've asked for 5 years to come to church. And the perspective is, if they came this Sunday, what would that experience be like? And what would the things that we would prioritize that would be meaningful and effective for them? So I think it's that sense of urgency coupled with the first time guest perspective, and then it becomes very powerful because it's in a way, we have systems and we have processes, but it's very fresh and personal, and it's about what they might experience and hear versus what might be my perspective, that having been there for a number of years.
Yeah, what I think you did do there too is it's not just the urgency, but then it's like the personalization. If I put myself in their shoes, what might they feel along this journey, and in that way. All right, let's get really practical. We've gotten the privilege of visiting a lot of churches for the very first time. I mean, a lot of churches. We're first-time guests to a lot of places. Let's talk about that first impression and the importance of what that means to guests, but get really practical. What draws people in when you are experiencing it? What do you see? What do you notice? What do you pick up on that could be a help to churches that are watching or listening?
Man, we could go so many directions with this. I think one is atmosphere is extremely important. Is it clean? Is it orderly? Is it intentional?
Right.
does it feel good? Does it sound good? Does it smell good? I mean, all these things have a big impact on the experience we're having in the environment, but they also have a big impact on the impression we leave with when we go home. Our senses are kind of like encoded into our memory, even beyond what we're consciously thinking about our church experience. So I think being intentional with all the elements of creating a great atmosphere kind of set the stage for someone to have a good experience when they come to church. But the other thing I would add is I think the kind of the atmosphere that people feel when they're interacting with volunteers and staff members is massive. I think we all understand that we ought to be friendly to people when they come into our church, but there's levels to that, and there is a people can feel it when it comes from an authentic place. They can sense it when they feel like someone is just saying hi, good morning in kind of a robotic or repetitive way.
Yeah.
They're just kind of, performing a rote task, versus someone who is really seeking to make an authentic connection, who's actually curious about you, who actually wants to ask questions and get to know you a little bit. Of course, that can go too far as well. We can be overbearing sometimes or overwhelming to people. So I think one of the biggest strengths when it comes to guest experience is just really good social awareness, being able to understand quickly as you meet a new person kind of where they're at and what's the appropriate level of engagement for them. Some people, they want you to hug them the moment they meet you. If you hugged me the moment you met me, that might freak me out a little bit. So I think there's an element of like discernment and awareness when you're engaging people, but always with the goal that not only is it warm, not only is it friendly, that's a good reflection of, the gospel, but also that it's really authentic and that it's really natural and that it's fitting to the person that we're interacting with.
There's so many nuances to what you just said, because I think when we help churches with giving a fresh perspective, we say is it was friendly, but it wasn't highly relational. The relational piece is beyond just saying hi, welcome, good morning, glad you're here, high five. It is asking questions about the guest. How did you hear about us? How long have you been coming? Who are you involved in anything? And then knowing what to do with that information, I think, is also the important piece, is to say, you're not just serving in a position, you're helping pull people towards the mission, getting connected, helping people engage in a next step. It's not like you have to walk away your first time. There's actually probably one ideal next step for a first-time guest. And so I think that's what you also feel. And the overbearing is like, let's get you signed up for this and do that. And like, I'm just checking it out. Like, just have one clear next step to point them to. And if everybody knows what to do, then it's like, oh, 3 people have told me I need to go to next steps, or I need to go to starting point, or I need to go to whatever your that's a whole nother conversation at a time. But I love what you're saying, because that then challenges me as a greeter or a host or whatever to look and to say, man, I love those Jordans, or like, hey, go Bears, or whatever, to find something that you connect with that person on, and to use that as a bridgeway to maybe make one of those intentional or authentic connections. Phil, Christy, anything that you've experienced that really draws people in or would draw you in?
I think dovetailing on the, when you're talking to somebody, being at ease, being aware, being connected, making sure that your conversation is right for the moment and the familiarity you have. Another thing that I'm really sensitive to, and I'm not sure why this always gets me, but is if I feel like I'm interrupting the volunteers' conversations. I love seeing that everybody loves to serve together. That's what we want. It's like you're serving in community with people that love you, that know your life, that are praying for you. But while we're serving, are we fixing our eyes on the people that we're helping get through the doors, probably, making it into church just on time, or maybe, barely on time if you're my family, and just we want to make sure that whatever they need, we are alert enough to notice that and help them. And so if two greeters are speaking to each other until the moment that I get to the doors. And then they just say, hey, good morning, how you doing? And I walk on through and they go back to their conversation. My presumption might be that their priority is the conversation with each other versus paying attention to and noticing the needs of the people that are coming through. And they may be noticing, but it's hard for me to tell that as a new person. So I might not ask them, where do I come? This is my first time. What do I do with my kids? What age room do they go to? Because they have something going on and I don't want to stop that. And so it's a delicate balance there as well, of having fun serving together, but making sure that people know that you're there to help them and you want to help them with whatever they need in that moment.
Yeah, that's good. That reminds me of the lady who's got her purse on and her coffee in her hand and she's serving at the door, but she's just really waiting for the service to start so she could slip in. It's like, that's completely contrary to the goal of what we're trying to do, is create that welcoming environment. Phil, what draws you in? You're not, I would say, an extrovert. You're right. You would say probably that. So you like to find spaces, right? To bear down on, and you're kind of a wallflower a little bit. Like, talk about what you like when you think about a new experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think about all the things that you guys have talked about. I also think about, back to you saying, what do you see, as we travel across the country, is I think we don't intend for this, but we tend to talk a lot in both one-on-one conversations with first-time guests and what I'm experiencing. We feel the need to talk about what we're doing, who we are, and all the things that are amazing if you would join in, which I think is the premise of that. When people go to check something out, they certainly want to know about it. But I think the thread of everything that I've heard so far goes back to, knowing someone and being interested in someone. The people I talk to that have been first-time guests, if they decide to land somewhere and you ask them why, it's because they connected with someone or a group of people. They don't say, it was so amazing, we just had to get involved. It's not to say that that's not important, but it's like, I or my kids really felt connected because people, I talked to somebody the other day and they said they dropped their kids off and at a church. This happened to be for an event. It wasn't first-time guests, but it's the same principle. And they said they picked them up later because they just dropped them off, picked them up later, and they have a great youth program. Both kids were miserable and said, I never want to go back. And the parents said, why is that? And they said, we didn't know anybody. And so the next time he dropped them off, he went in, introduced them to one of the leaders who understood who they were and that they were new. And they came back to pick them up that night and they were like, when can we come back? And I think that's the same principle for first-time guests. Most people I know are coming back the second week because they met someone that they either saw something that they wanted, like I saw something in their eyes that, like, I want that kind of piece, or I can't believe how much they were interested in my stuff. So I think what we've seen a lot is we get so excited, and then the next thing we do is, I call it referral versus relationship. So you mention, you're new, and it's like, you should be in a group, and here's the website to go to be in a group, versus like a little bit more exploratory about finding out that, you're a single dad, and, so referring them to a general pool might not be the thing, but to say, hey, there's this great group of, of guys that meet that are single or whatever, that those are the personal connections. I think that if we take it down, but they all are obligated by getting some bits of information. To Greg's point, we can't feel like we're doing a deep dive and certain people are going to come back. But I think that's more about, give me your information and we're going to contact you, rather than just saying, what brought you here and what's going on and what do you need? So I think
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I think are important to think about. It's all a product of, for lack of a better term, of intimacy. How do you create intimacy, but also give them a overall experience?
Yeah, there's almost this map of the experience, because like when you're outside and you're operating heavy machinery, you know, you're driving on, I want to know directions really, really clearly, really, really quickly, and then you can be friendly next. Like, help me just park, help me just know where to go, because I've never been here before and I'm not sure if I'm going down one way, the wrong way. If is this a reserved parking spot, is that for me? And then you get to out of your car, now it's like, okay, actually see me for me. And then you get back into the auditorium and it's like, now give me instructions. Okay, great. And then I'm back outside the auditorium. Now actually tell me about your experience. Tell me about your engagement with the church. If you're a raving fan, that actually goes way farther than we've got great groups, we've got great teams, we've got great events. It's like, no, tell me how the church has changed your life. That actually, I think, has a really big impact. Again, you always want to balance it. It's like, yeah, I stood there for 15 minutes and they told me all about how great their small group is, but they never once asked me a question about me or what, I think you're right, is tailor making your next step based on the conversation I have, which means I just have to be good at asking personal relational questions.
Yeah. I think I also think it's a little counterintuitive. I mean, you referred before, I'm not way on the scale, but I'm definitely an introvert. So I'm looking for the ability to know what's next. I'm not looking to stand in spaces that feel like there's nothing else to do. Meaning, if there's a coffee station, if there's
Yeah.
and I think sometimes it can be intimidating to, the half of all of us that are on the introvert side, when there are spaces, but there are people standing behind counters or behind, in areas that you have to go and approach. And so it's like, if you're left with common space area and then three really nice looking areas, that one's called connections and one's called something else, like, I'm typically not going to feel great about going up cold and just saying, hey, I've got some questions, or can I engage with you?
Right.
I think we think that somebody like me would want to wait till, let's not approach them. I am much more comfortable if somebody just comfortably comes up and says, hey, my name's Sue, or my name's Bob, and shakes my hand and says, what's your name? And I'm like, I'm Phil. And if they have some questions, then I'm really comfortable engaging in that environment.
Right.
And I would prefer that they would come find me, but that's kind of counterintuitive to say, well, introverts want to be left alone. It's really not that. I don't want to have to generate a conversation or be the person who, asks open-ended questions for people, because I don't really know what so I'd love for somebody to really tactfully come up, one person versus walking up to a table of 4 volunteers, right, and they all look at me and start asking me questions. Like, that's uncomfortable. So just something to think about.
But I know it's inevitable. Somebody's asking, like, well, how do we do that? Like, we've got the booth. Like, that's what the booth's for. And I think I'd double down on it's training, because a first-time guest has that first-time guest look. They're looking around, they're standing by themselves, they're fiddling with their cup. And to have those people at that area, because I still think that area is so important. I would say, do you have a new here area, an info area, and a connect area? Like, let's try to simplify this, because you probably are confusing people of where to go, but compelling those people who worked that table, not just to be like, I'm waiting for somebody to come, and if nobody came, then that's not my problem, but to say, go out and look for those people and engage them and bring them to it, is like, that's when you start to realize your training and your team and the development of those team members are at the next level, because that's great. Great opportunity there.
Yeah. You have a great coaching handle on that, Philip, that I think is super helpful, which is the difference between training our people to be missional versus positional. Can you unpack that for a minute?
Yeah, I think the idea would be to tell all of our team members that there is a mission that we're on, and our mission primarily for the weekend is to help people take a next step. And so it's not, there is a specific next step at specific junctures, But to be relational, you actually can find out, oh, you're just visiting for the first time. Your next step is next steps or growth track or, starting point, whatever you call your assimilation experience. Or no, you've been coming for a while and you're looking to find your people. You should start to step into serving on a team or serving, being in a small group. So by having those conversations, I realize my role on the weekend is much bigger than shaking hands, greeting people at the door, helping people find a seat, but it's engaging with a guest and helping people find their next step, which means I'm able to be missional versus positional. I can abandon my post for a moment to take somebody to find that next step. And so it's almost cross-training everybody to say, and the tendency always is that without vision, we resort to the least common denominator, which is the task. So I stand I'm auditorium door left. And that's not like, nobody's going to find joy in that. Yes, I'm doing you a favor. That's what it tends to feel like from a volunteer's perspective. So to help raise it up and say, no, we're actually here all one mission, one team, just different positions. Let's help people take that step. It just challenges us, I think, as leaders to keep that mission ahead in front of everyone and then train people to almost choose your own story ending, of like, everybody's equipped to know how to take somebody to that next step. So
I have a question about everybody, because a lot of what we're talking about is training our volunteers, but we have a strategic moment whenever we host before and after service to educate everybody in the room about what we think about first-time guests, how excited we are to grow God's kingdom, and help everybody know how we do next steps at the church. How do you use those moments, Greg and Philip? I know you have the most hosting experience. How do you use those moments to make sure anybody in the congregation could help somebody in the church understand what the church is about and what their next step might be?
That's a good question. Greg, go for it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, again, just trying to put on that lens of seeing it from the perspective of someone who's new, someone who has never been in our church before, maybe somebody who's never been in a church like this before. Maybe they only grew up going to mass at the Catholic Church, or it could even be somebody who's never been in church, period. So when we evaluate and kind of build out our talking points through that filter, it should help us eliminate really churchy language, insider language, anything that could be confusing to someone who's new. But it should also help us try to get really sharp and really clear on the information we're communicating and then the things we're asking people to do. The simplest kind of framework for building any communication is, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? I have absolutely been guilty before when I'm on stage holding a microphone of really wanting to sound good and really wanting people to like me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We ought to be excellent in our communication, but us sounding good should never come at the expense of our clarity. And when we're too focused on being impressive on stage, we can lose, just the basic simple thing we want people to do. So I think another discipline that's really helpful is just getting a little more selective about what we say. I think when we are on stage, the more different kinds of information we give people, the more announcements we give, the more action steps, the more options we give people, the less and less they're going to retain, and the less able they are to understand what is actually most important right now. And it's hard because there's always so much going on. There's always so much that we can talk about. But if we can focus, get disciplined, and only talk about a couple of things, that will actually get us a better result in all those areas.
That's great. I think, Christy, you have this equation, is clarity with consistency equals confidence. So the more we could say, and I know it feels rote, but if we could say the same thing every experience, every service, it's also just training our people to know, if you're here for the first time, take this step. We want to put a gift in your hand. We want to meet you at the connection area. You should attend this class, whatever it might be. If we're saying it consistently, regularly, then it's also helping the people in the congregation join us on that mission to help them connect as well. So I would also say, back up a little bit. And this is just like a tip for if anybody has a first time guest experience strategy. We're trying to identify them in the parking lot, give them a primo space. Don't assess it to make sure there's no gaps in that process. Because a lot of times I pull in and I pull into the first time guest parking and the parker says, "Hey, glad to have you." And then I walk in by myself. And what it's causing me to do is identify myself again later as a first time guest because you dropped the strategy somewhere along the way. So places that do this well catch you out your door. Again, not too close, not too creepy, but they give you something and something that identifies you from that point forward as a guest. Now, I will tell you, a gift is not a bag of all your stuff. What I mean, it was a sermon and here's this. Just call it a starter kit or something. I don't know. Just don't call it a gift if it's just all of your branded stuff or it's a pen and a notepad and all that kind of stuff. Call it something different. Get a gift that you think people would actually want. But those kinds of things help also equip the congregation to realize and to engage you in a specific way. I see you're here for the first time. They don't even have to ask that anymore. They don't even have to say that anymore. They can just engage. I won't say this is the last thing, but another thing that came to mind too is if your team's serving on a rotation, really challenge the team members who aren't in position that week to still engage guests on their off week. That's their role. Hey, help build the environment in the auditorium and help engage guests on the weekends that you're not serving. That just doubles the amount of people that are helping you push people to connect and engage. All right, I got a question for us. When we often say that distractions are in the details, talk about how you've seen the attention or lack of attention to details play a major role in the engagement to guests.
I'll say a detail that I'm always looking for because I think it does make a big difference. It's a small thing to us on the inside, but it can make a big impact to a new guest is our signage. Is our signage clear? Is it giving the information people need to know? Basic directional signage. Which way is the kids ministry? Where is the bathroom? Yeah. I mean, these are the things that people are going to be wondering. And every unanswered question they have in their mind is going to be a source of anxiety. It's going to be a source of distraction. It could introduce friction into their experience, which takes them out of just being present for the thing we're trying to give them, which is experiencing God. So making sure we have really clear signage, making sure that there's enough of it. We probably can always err on the side of more signage rather than less. Making sure that it's big enough, especially if we're talking about signage that's out on the street or out in the parking lot. The font needs to be big because people are seeing it from a distance. If it's inside the building, is it elevated so that people can actually see it above, the crowd that may be in the lobby? All that kind of stuff. I think that's an often overlooked detail that can make a big difference for the guest.
Phil, you're a man that's highly attuned to details. What do you see? What do you experience that could draw you in or pull you out just because the details were seen or not seen?
Yeah, I think another one is things like, when I go into the restroom, does it feel thoughtful or does it, because some of our locations are going to be, a high school or, other places like that, and I don't think when people think about detail, it's like, well, I can't make the bathroom great. It doesn't have marble tops on the, it's rustic, if you will. But I think what people notice is what you've done. Trust is built on how you've stewarded what you have. So I think when I go into the restroom and it's been scented and there are hand towels there of some kind that because the ones that the school normally puts out don't work, or, that's the kind of detail I'm looking for to say, well, I think what impresses people in the detail is they care this much that they did that. And I think when you see that, you're like, somebody got here potentially at 4 or 5 in the morning and did that in the restroom of a high school, and I think it kind of in some very small fashion tells them the lengths God will go to and Jesus will go to capture their heart and how much they care about them. So I think those are the kind of things that, with what we've talked about so far, but that's just one of many areas is, can you throw some paint on something that looks like it's fallen apart or whatever? It's the effort and not the overall impression that you're in a high-end 5-star building.
Yeah, cleanliness goes a long, long way. That fresh scent, that clean space. I'm going to bring us back to, as we wrap up, the resource specifically. Greg, all the points under each of the areas are questions. I know that this was intentional, but share the why behind it and give us a little bit of details where we can find the resource.
Yeah, it's framed in the context of questions because not only does that serve as a prompt that just kind of allows us to look at all the small things we want to evaluate, but also questions activate our thinking in a different way than just being given an answer. So what I love about this resource is it can be valuable for me if I'm, the staff member over guest experience, or if I'm the pastor at my church. It allows me to evaluate something, but it can also be used as an equipping tool or a training tool for our team. We could easily hand this checklist to all our teams and say, hey, can you use this on Sunday and walk through the church and just take notes and see what you see and see if there's anything we're missing or see if there's some areas that are doing really well that we can capitalize on. So it kind of works in dual function in that way. The resource is free to access at focus412.com/resources. And we also, we send out free resources every single month. So, and as we're working with churches, we're always keeping our eye out for things that we can create or curate that will be helpful to everybody. So once a month, we're always introducing new resources. There's a whole bank of them available on that page. You can also sign up to receive those in your inbox every single month too.
Another thing that might be helpful too is if you want to see one of our beautiful faces on site, help you with a first-time guest experience. We call it an Insight On-Site. You can check that out online, focus412.com. So thank you all so much for spending some time, giving us some perspective. I'm sure there's so much to unpack with just connections, guests, just the environments, experiences. We'll be back to talk a little bit more in depth. But thank you guys for your time. We'll see you soon.